Losing a loved one brings with it the shock of the loss, and this shock does several things to us and for us in the grief process. So let's walk together and I'll show you how you can navigate this aspect of grief and then what to do when the shock begins to actually wear off. Hey friend, welcome back to Grief Questions Answered. I'm Eric, and it's my goal with these videos to share everything I've learned about how to survive, find the support in the loneliness of grief, and how to intentionally get back up and live beyond the loss of a loved one. If this grief tip doesn't help you today, I am confident it can and will help you at some point in the future, so be sure to save this video to watch later on. So today's question comes from April, who asked me, what do I do when the shock wears off? And this is such a great question, April, because this brought up a lot of memories when you asked me this. When I lost my daughter Zoe, I remember being at the hospital that night, and a couple of the hospital administrators brought me into a room, told me just 1 hour after I lost Zoe, and even hugged her for the last time, that they were sorry for my loss. And I remember walking out of that room, and I wandered the halls back and forth for almost an hour, recalling what they said to me. And I'm like, what the hell just happened? I didn't even realize that I was pacing like I was too, because I was in shock. And a little while later, when I got home from the hospital, I remember watching the Australian Open on TV because I was in shock. Now, it was the aftershocks that really threw me for a loop. Every time I replayed what happened only hours beforehand, I felt that other wave hit me of shock, wave after wave. And by the next morning, I felt like I was cocooned in that brain fog that happens. And that is shock, right? So the week after we laid Zoe to rest, I started having phantom pains in my body, and I couldn't explain where they came from, in my shoulders and my hips. And I didn't want to eat for days. And it took a family friend, Anna, to actually make me a protein smoothie because I wasn't even looking for anything to eat. But that was my experience, and maybe for you the shock can show up indifferently, both emotionally and physically. And so emotionally, here's what may happen. You may feel numb, as if you're detached from reality. There may be some disbelief and difficulty even accepting the reality of the situation. You could be in some form of denial or even flat out refusal to believe that the loss has even happened. And you may even have some sudden bursts of intense emotions like crying, sadness, anger, anxiety, fear, all of it, okay? And then there is the brain fog or the confusion where you have difficulty concentrating or even making any decisions like I did with the eating. Also, there could be some mood swings in there where 1 minute you're sad and the next minute you're angry or feeling guilty. It's just all part of this. Physically, though, you may feel exhausted. You might even feel nauseous, like you can't eat. You may have headaches or migraines. It may spill over into sleep issues, either falling asleep or staying asleep. And for a while, your heart may actually be racing. It's just the adrenaline because of the shock. Now, grief shock is a very powerful coping mechanism that we all have built in us. And it shows up differently for each of us as well. And so if you're experiencing anything of what I just described emotionally and physically, it's okay, it's normal, and it may be very powerful. If it is too powerful for you, then please seek out a doctor or a therapist so they can help you. But as you progress through this journey, the shock is going to be with you for a while. And for some, it lasts a few weeks. Others, it could be years. And by the way, there's nothing wrong with you no matter how long it lasts, because eventually at some point your shock is going to wear off. And when it does, this is an important shift, as it's very common to experience a range of emotions as it sets in. And so I want to share with you 3 ways that you can navigate this aspect of grief and what you can do to help yourself at each step, okay? The first is that when the shock is wearing off, You may begin to experience this wide range of emotions that you weren't expecting. Some of these can leave you feeling worried about yourself. Please know that all this is normal, but if they scare you to the point where you feel like you can't cope well, then please reach out to your doctor or therapist to help, because I know how that feels, and it is very scary. And it was a few months when I finally felt the shock wear off with Zoe, and it was such intense sadness during that phase. But I had all of Zoe's friends, my therapist, my friends, they all helped me through those moments. And it was when I could talk about it that it helped the most. And that's just what worked for me. When the shock is wearing off, you may have a moment when the reality hits you that they're not coming back. And this realization is very powerful because you're coming to grips with the loss. See, for a while, I had a fantasy that Zoe was just going to walk through the door. Or I'd wake up from a horrible nightmare and just be so grateful that she was alive. We didn't wake up. We're not waking up from that, right? But I remember one day I was driving home from work and I said out loud, "Oh my God, she's not coming back." And that really hit me. I was started to sweat. It hurt me to the core. And I almost panicked on what I was going to be doing about it. But the thing is, I was already doing something about it, including connecting with my friends, my family, and Zoe's friends often. Because together they were the ones that were going to be continuing on this journey with me. And it really helped me some. And if you're feeling alone, like no one has your back, they invite you to connect to an online group or an in-person group, or even a coach or a counselor to talk to somebody who gets what you're going through, right? You don't have to navigate this journey alone. Now, the final step here that you can take is it's important to take some form of action so that you don't get stuck here. A lot of times grief feels like quicksand, right? Because we get stuck and we feel like the best option is just to isolate ourselves or tell ourselves a different story that no one cares about us, when in reality, our healing is only going to happen because of us. No one can take this pain away from us, and so we have to be our own advocates. And it's okay to do that. And the way we can do that is by taking things one day at a time, and by reframing the narrative that we tell ourselves that I'm going to honor my loved one by carrying on the best that I can. I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to do my best, and that's going to have to be enough. You see, you're not obligated to anybody but yourself in this journey. And it doesn't matter what you do, except it's got to work for you. So remember that everyone grieves differently, and there's no one right way to navigate grief except for the one way that works for you. Give yourself the time and the space that you need to heal. As always, I hope this helps. And so, do you have a question about grief that I can answer for you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't done so yet, click that subscribe button down below, as this is one of the best ways to get notified of new videos just like this and to show support for the channel. So let's continue to walk together, and I'll see you in next week's video.